Greetings and welcome back to another episode of Christian News and Views. This is episode 201. So, this is Monday, and I was reading, actually, yesterday, I was reading a Gallup poll, and I'm going to start out with that. A Gallup poll revealed that President Donald Trump's approval rating has dropped to 37%, marking, marking a notable decline in public support from the start of his second term. His backing among independents has decreased, but support among Republicans has remained high. The downturn has largely been driven by mounting dissatisfaction with his immigration policies and economic management, which many voters view as harmful and ineffective. Hogwash. I'm sorry, but that's the word that comes to my mind is hogwash. The problem isn't that any of that is true. The problem is that particular article, and perhaps the writer herself, um, it's what they look at. See, when you look at polls that reflect actual voters and are not preoccupied with left-wing voters, you get a different view. I discovered some time ago that not all polls are equal. Now, that's not exactly revolutionary, but I think many of us get, because of the constant onslaught of the liberal media, we forget that they are liberal and their polls are also liberal. None of those polls will say no. We have financial support from both liberals and conservatives, and that's true. Until you look at it, some time ago, I took a look at that. Didn't go all that deep. I'll admit that. But it was almost apparent from the very beginning that while there were some conservative monies coming in, they were outgained by the liberals. And if you don't want to follow that line of thinking, look at the results. Uh, the results of those things. How did those results work out? Were they correct or were they wrong? You see, I don't waste my time looking at polls. These same organizations have downgraded Trump ever since he first announced that he was running to become the president of this country. When he made that announcement, I didn't know much about him and tended to believe the polls myself. I was believing the newspapers, believing the news. That, but as time went by, I began to notice um, different things about him that were not quite lining up with what the press was saying. At the same time, I came across a prognosticator who made a prediction that just about knocked me out of my chair. Um, I was at the time following Senator Cruz, who would have made, I think, a fine president, by the way. Uh, I think he's a great senator. But I was impressed with him, impressed with how he handled himself and and the how he could communicate to the voters. Well, this procrastinator, and I'll get around to naming him later, uh, actually pointed out that Trump was going after the same people that Cruz was going after, and he predicted that Trump was going to outdo Cruz, which, by the way, is exactly what happened. And that's eventually why Cruz got out, dropped out, because they were going after the same people, and only one person could get Now, in the Democratic Party, you can have three different candidates and all three count the same people. But on the Republican side, that's not quite able to do that. And so Senator Cruz had to drop out. Well, at first, I was thinking Trump has a chance to win? No way. But the more I watched and the more I listened to this prognosticator, the more I realized the truth. See, almost all of the polls were casting him as a flawed man who had no chance. But there were, aside from the one procrastinator, there were others who followed polls that were saying something different. They were saying, wait a minute, people are listening to him. And the one man who spoke out that and said Trump was going to win, that's the one I began to listen to. And at first, like I said, I laughed. But then I noticed as time went by that these pronouncements that he was making about Trump had a way of coming true. Now, you might be asking what polls and who was I listening to? Well, I'm not going to say, at least not about the polls. Why? Because that's you, need to check it out for yourself. Take a look at the history of the polls and see which ones predicted his election in 2016 and in 2024. I don't include 2020 because there was some funny stuff going on back then, and country's still divided over that. I've made up my own mind on it, and so I don't include that. A lot of I'm not going to say. I just go with 2016 and 2024. So while you are at it, looking at these polls, ask which of the polls actually, now listen to this, actually polled citizens, not merely residents, not merely people who live in the United States, maybe and don't really have a legal right to vote, but legal citizens who have a legal right to vote and who have are registered and have a history of actually voting. They were not just registered, they had a track record. And that's the best kind of poll. Now, another thing you can do is learn to read between the lines. That is a good practice. I started learning that. I didn't know I was learning it, but I started learning that as a young man because even back then, it wasn't quite so pronounced as it is now, but the news media was starting to mix their opinions in with the news. And so I learned the hard way, I guess you'd say, by actually reading the news and realizing, well, this is an opinion, it's not a fact. And I learned to separate them. It's not an easy thing to do or to learn, but you can simply by reading the news and looking at the facts. And if you look at the news close enough, you can usually tell uh, when something is fictional, especially if it regards Trump, because they will make some absolute statements that are obviously the writer's opinion. And so the thing to do is to pull that out and put it over here. So you have the news here, the opinion over here, and the news is the facts. Over here is the opinion, which may or may not be good, may or may not be correct. And you can read it, get their opinion. There's nothing wrong with them having an opinion. It's when they mix the two together that I object to. So you separate the opinion from the facts, and that is extremely important and is and difficult. And that whole process is one of the reasons why Christian News and Views exists. If you notice, if you've ever watched this before, I have the facts, and then I put my opinion, which is what I'm doing right now, giving you my opinions. And my opinions are separated so that you, the viewer, can choose for yourself what to believe. Here's the facts, and here's my opinion. Is my opinion bear, does it look like it bears weight? Does it look reliable? Does it look and sound truthful? Does it match what your own discoveries have learned? And so and one of the things that I try to do is to get you interested in the subject and to do your own thinking about it. I trust American people on that. We've been fed a lot of falsehoods over the years, and it's because it was mixed in with the facts, and people tended to believe those facts. But when the American people see it for what it is and start separating the two, they start coming around, becoming and actually become get on the Trump bandwagon. So if I do mix my view in with the facts, I tell you so. And sometimes I have done that. Now, today's is primarily my opinion because I thought it was important that I take time out to talk to you about polls. You can't trust them. They might be slanted one way or the other. Now, most of the time they're slanted to the left, but they could be. There's a few out there that may be slanted to the right. What you want is the facts. And if you look at the polls and look at how they ask their questions, almost that will tell you a lot about them. So but I would suggest this, instead of checking out each and every poll, why not check out the prognosticators who use them, who is usually right? Now here, I pay attention to Dick Morris, a former consultant actually to President Clinton. So he was, I don't know what his politics were back then, but I would say he was probably to the left a little bit. But he's come to the right. And so he gives his opinion. He prognosticates. But he is actually goes and looks at polls that look at registered voters who have a track record of voting. When you have a poll like that, the chances of being accurate go up, up, up. There have been times I've disagreed with him, but I'll tell you this, I better have my facts in line if I'm going to disagree with him, because he comes out with facts. Now, he had back then and still does have an excellent resume as far as reading polls and interpreting them are concerned. There are a few other people as well as him. To my knowledge, all the better prognosticators rely on polls that look at the registered voters who have a record of voting in the past. And these voters are likely to vote again. That's quite a criteria. And it covers that one. It covers both liberal and conservatives. They try to keep it even, whereas other polls are slanted towards the liberal more. Now, even the best polls fail, and the best prognosticators fail. But you find one with a success record, stick with him or stick with her. Or chances are you will have a good grasp of the truth. Now, here, I have a little truth I made up, but I think it's true. Listen to this. Liberals are like AI, artificial intelligence. If they can't find the truth, they simply create their version of the truth. So if you follow AI at all, AI is amoral, and it will go out and it will find stuff that's copyrighted and present it as presented as a fact without notification that it's copyrighted material. Or if it goes out there and looks for an answer to your question and it can't find it, it will make one up. And so I think liberals are the same way. So liberals are like AI. If they can't find the truth, they simply create their version of the truth. Like AI, they then repeat it like it is the truth. Stay away from them. So that is pretty much it for today. I wanted to take the time out to just address this issue. We're not at this point yet into the election year. Yeah, they're already talking about it though. But you're always seeing these quotations from polls. Well, this poll here, Trump suffered a blow because of this poll and this poll. No, don't pay. This is not. I don't even. Most of the time, I don't even look at these polls. The only reason I looked at this one that I led off with was because I was thinking that right even then that might be a good subject to address. Polls to be helpful need to be based on facts. They need to be reliable. They need to be something that you can put your teeth into, so to speak. So if they to be that way, the people that are making a vote, they're talking about you voting, all right? So it should be somebody who is an American citizen, who is a registered voter, and who has a record of voting. Now, there's some out there who wouldn't just coming of age, so they wouldn't have that record. But most of the voters that the poll would have been that. The poll, I didn't cite this, but the bigger the poll numbers, my understanding, the bigger the poll numbers of people involved, the voters and so forth, the bigger the pool, yes, the bigger the pool is, the truer the poll numbers will be. So that's something to look at. And the one thing I'll say that most of the polls, uh, they will tell you a little bit about themselves, not much, but a little. Another thing to do is to look at the questions they ask. They can be leading questions. So look at them and see, how is this really a good question? Is it a softball? Is it something that really is phrased so that sort of neutral, so that the responder will give their honest opinion, or is it something that will direct them in a certain direction? So these are things. Also look at the prognosticators themselves. I'm not saying follow Dick Morris. You may or may not like him. But I would suggest that you look out there and see who is doing. If you're going to, and by the way, don't put all your treasure, all your votes, if you will, um, in that one prognosticator. But he's a valued, or she is, either way, valued resource. Make sure that that resource uses the right type of poll. And if they do, then listen to them. And you don't have to agree with them. But again, like I said about myself, you better have your facts ready because I don't argue with him. But anything like that, get in debates with him. But with my own mind, I might. And I encourage you to do that, to think about it, to weigh what they're saying against what you at least think you know, and look at what you know and you think you know, and see, was that based on fact itself? And you can always check that out. And you can use AI, by the way, to help you. I always tell people in my other program, I have another one called Becoming a Published Author is Fun. And I tell people, if you're going to use AI, check and verify. You should always do that no matter what you're using it for. Check and verify, because it doesn't have any sense of morality. It's just going to go out there and get answers or create them. And you can phrase your questions in such a way as to force AI to be a little bit more honest with you, but always check and verify. Well, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I hope if you haven't subscribed that you will get on there and subscribe right down here, right there, right about there. There should be a little box. It's on one side or the other of the screen, and click on that, and you'll get a chance to subscribe. When you subscribe, you're encouraging me. And there's three things I always tell you that I do. I want to inform you, encourage you, and inspire you. Whether I do that or not, that's totally up to you to decide that. I have no say in that matter. I've done my best to try to do that, and hopefully you will agree. Well, you have a great day, and I will see you in the next episode.